Your
Yeah.
vote is your voice, right? But what happens if your voice just gets lost in the mail?
Yeah, well, it's a question that, millions of people might actually have to ask themselves really soon.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking right at you, the listener, because California is gearing up for a massive election on November 3, 2026. Voters are going to choose all 52 House seats, 80 Assembly seats, and a completely new governor to replace Gavin Newsom.
Right, it's huge.
But there is this storm brewing behind the scenes over the actual physical machinery of voting. I mean, in a recent special election, the number of rejected mail-in ballots literally quadrupled.
Wow.
Yeah. And meanwhile, down in Riverside County, a sheriff just seized 600,000 ballots as part of this highly secretive investigation.
It's a lot to take in. I mean, the scale of this upcoming election really can't be overstated, but the physical systems we use to process, verify, and actually count those votes, they are showing some serious stress fractures.
Exactly. So our mission for this deep dive today is to unpack all of that. We're looking at the mechanics, the math, and the massive legal battles that are defining the 2026 ballot box.
And we've got a huge stack of sources today.
We do everything from law reviews and raw election data to actual court filings.
Right. And, to really understand why these mechanical issues are suddenly causing such a panic, you have to look at what's actually on the line in 2026.
Right. Set the stage for us.
Well, this isn't just some sleepy midterm. You have an entirely new political landscape. Tony Thurmond is running for governor. Fiona Ma is going for lieutenant governor. Rob Bonta is defending the attorney general seat.
That's a lot of heavy-hitting statewide seats.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, you have all those highly contested congressional districts using the newly redrawn maps from Proposition 50.
Right, the Prop 50 maps.
Yeah, so control of the U.S. House of Representatives could literally come down to just a handful of California districts.
So, I mean, the stakes are just sky high, which obviously means every single piece of paper matters. But before any candidate can claim victory, the voter have to clear this very basic physical hurdle, right? Getting that piece of paper out of their neighborhood and into the actual counting room.
Yes, exactly. And that brings us to a really shocking piece of data from the November 2025 special election.
The one that passed Prop 50.
Right. So in that election, the rejection rate for mail-in ballots just spiked dramatically.
Yeah, I was looking at these numbers earlier, and I actually had to reread them. So get this. 8 out of every 1,000 mail-in ballots were rejected just for arriving late.
Which is wild.
It is. Now, to you listening to this, 8 out of 1,000 might not sound like a huge deal at first glance. But if you compare it to the 2024 general election, back then, only 2 out of every 1,000 ballots were rejected for being late.
So that's a quadruple increase in discarded votes?
Massive quadruple increase, yeah.
And the root cause here is actually pretty fascinating because it has nothing to do with voters suddenly forgetting how the mail works, right?
Right.
It comes down to pure logistics. The U.S. Postal Service has been systematically changing its routes and reducing the number of mail pickup trips they make, especially out in rural areas, basically to cut costs.
Wait, let's unpack this right here. Are you telling me that if I do everything right and I drop my ballot in an official government-approved blue mailbox on Election Day, my vote can legally be tossed in the trash just because a mail truck didn't happen to drive by until Wednesday morning?
Yeah. I mean, yes, that is exactly the mechanism at play here.
That's just crazy.
Let's break down how California law actually works in this situation, because the state does have what is known as a 7-day grace period.
Okay, so a buffer.
Right, a buffer. That means as long as your ballot reaches the election office within 7 days after Election Day, it is totally valid. But there is an absolute deal breaker attached to that rule. The envelope must have an official postmark stamped on or before Election Day.
Oh, okay. So the actual physical ink stamp applied by the post office is the ultimate authority here.
Exactly. The postmark is what proves you voted on time. But here's the logistical trap. Let's say you drop your ballot in a collection box at 4:00 p.m. on Election Day.
Pretty standard.
Right. But the postal worker already made their single daily pickup for that box at, say, 10:00 a.m.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So your ballot just sits there overnight. It gets picked up on Wednesday morning. It gets a Wednesday postmark. And even if a truck rushes it to the election office so it arrives that very same Wednesday afternoon, well within the 7 days.
It's just instantly disqualified.
Instantly tossed out.
That's wild. It completely undermines the whole concept of Election Day.
Totally.
And the data we have in our stack shows that rural counties took a massive hit because of this exact thing. I mean, Merced County saw almost a 7-fold increase in late ballots.
7-fold. Wow.
Yeah. And Kern County tossed out over 3,300 ballots purely because of late postmarks. State officials actually had to hold press conferences begging people not to use mailboxes on Election Day if they lived far from regional sorting hubs.
Right, because the logistics of sorting mail have fundamentally changed over the last few years. Like, mail doesn't always stay in your local town to get stamped anymore.
What do you mean?
Well, it often gets put on a truck, driven maybe 3 hours to a massive consolidated processing center, and then it gets stamped there. So a slight delay in that trucking route means a Tuesday vote suddenly gets a Wednesday stamp.
I mean, I feel like we were basically punishing voters for the post office's budget cuts.
That's certainly what it looks like in the data.
People have spent decades dropping their ballots in the mail on a Tuesday. Now, the Postal Service is telling voters they should mail their ballots a full week early just to be safe.
It just creates this massive tension between established voter habits and modern postal reality.
Okay, but let's say you beat the clock, right? You're a super proactive voter, you mail your ballot a full week early, and it arrives on time with the absolute perfect postmark. You're safe, right? Your vote counts.
Well, not quite.
Oh, come on.
Because now that your ballot is physically inside the building, it faces an even more unpredictable hurdle. You have to pass the signature test.
Ah, yes, the signature trap. This blew my mind when we were digging into the research for this.
It's a huge issue.
It is the second biggest reason ballots get thrown out: missing or mismatched signatures. Now, obviously, some people just forget to sign the outside of the envelope entirely, which, creates a pretty clear problem.
Right. A missing signature is an automatic flag. You can't really argue with that one. But the far more complicated issue is the mismatched signature.
Right.
This is where election officials try to verify your identity by comparing the fresh signature on your ballot envelope to the historical signature they have on file for you.
Like from the DMV.
Exactly. Usually pulled from your DMV records or maybe your original voter registration card from years ago.
And the crazy part is how they actually do that comparison. It changes wildly depending on what county line you happen to live behind.
It really does.
For example, Orange County relies purely on human reviewers. To throw out a signature there, 3 different election officials must sit down, look at the 2 signatures, and all agree that they are significantly different.
But then if you drive just a few miles north into Los Angeles County, the process shifts completely. They don't use humans, they use machines.
Right.
Specifically, they use automated signature verification scanners, or ASV for short.
So we have tired humans eyeballing cursive in one county and literal robots scanning ink patterns in the next county over. I gotta say, both of these methods sound deeply flawed when you look at the actual mechanics of human handwriting.
They are deeply flawed, and we actually have a great study in our stack today from the Vanderbilt Law Review that completely tears apart the reliability of both methods.
Let's get into it.
Okay, let's look at the human element first. When researchers studied elections in Ohio, which relies heavily on human verification just like Orange County, they found a staggering failure rate.
Okay.
Out of all the ballots that were rejected by human workers for a bad signature match, 97% of those signatures were actually legitimate.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm hearing that correctly. 97% of the time that a human worker looked at a signature and confidently said, this is a fake, it was actually the real voter.
Yes, 97% of those rejections were false positives.
That is insane.
It's massive. The Vanderbilt study points out that the human error rate for election workers trying to match signatures is around 26%.
26%.
Yep. And to put that into perspective, trained forensic document examiners, like people whose entire career studying handwriting, they have an error rate of just a fraction of a percent.
Right, but election workers aren't forensic experts.
Not at all. They're often temporary staff. They might get like an hour-long training video on signature verification, and then they're just asked to look at thousands of envelopes over a really long shift.
It's absurd.
Well,
I mean, it feels like we were expecting a voter's rushed signature on a digital grocery checkout pad to perfectly match the careful, practiced cursive they used on their driver's license a decade ago.
that is such a good way to put it.
Like, my signature today just looks like a flat line with a little bump at the beginning. It looks absolutely nothing like the signature on my first passport.
And that's exactly the blind spot for human reviewers, right? Handwriting is dynamic. It changes.
Right.
You get older, maybe you develop arthritis, you sign things in a rush on the hood of your car, or you just use a completely different type of pen. A thick Sharpie looks very different than a cheap ballpoint pen.
Oh, for sure.
And humans, especially tired humans, looking at their 2000th envelope of the day, they really struggle to account for all those natural variations. They see a different loop or maybe a missing slant, and they just flag it.
Okay, so humans are terrible at this because of fatigue and natural handwriting changes. So the machines must be the answer, right?
No.
I mean, Los Angeles uses the automated scanners. How do the robots do?
Not much better, unfortunately.
Naturally.
And the mechanics of why the technology fails are actually pretty fascinating. These ASV scanners, they run on algorithms. They don't see a signature the way you and I do.
Right, they're just computers.
Exactly. They measure geometry. The software maps out technical data points, like the overall aspect ratio of the word, the density of the strokes, and what they call turning points, which are basically the sharp angles and loops in the letters.
So it's treating my handwriting like a complex barcode.
Basically, yes. It compares the geometry of the envelope signature to the geometry of the DMV signature. But here is the major flaw. The algorithms need a lot of data points to make an accurate match. And the Vanderbilt study shows the machines consistently fail when they don't have enough data to chew on. This means they improperly reject shorter names or hyphenated names.
A
single vote
so if
in
my
the
name
US
is something
Senate can
long
freeze
like
the most
Christopher,
powerful government
the
on
machine
Earth.
has plenty of
But
loops
right
and
now,
turning points to
a
analyze.
political
Yeah.
standoff
If my name is
threatens
Leo
to blow up the
or
rules
N,
forever.
Yeah, we
The
are
robot
watching the
just gets
fundamental
confused and
machinery of
throws out my
American
vote.
lawmaking.
Yes, exactly.
A shorter name
Grind to
has
an
fewer
absolute
stroke
halt.
features,
And honestly,
so
the
a machine is
physical
much
toll on the
more
people
likely
inside
to
that
flag
building
it as
is
an
about to
anomaly.
become very real.
And the data
Right, so
clearly
let's set the
shows
scene.
this
It's
technological
March
quirk
2026.
disproportionately
Picture the
impacts
hallways of the
minority
United States
voters and
Capitol
young
right now.
voters. So
Aides
the
are
machines aren't
literally
necessarily
dragging
fixing the problem at
military-style
all. They're
cots
just
into
replacing
back
human fatigue
offices.
with
Oh, yeah.
algorithmic blind
Staffers
spots.
are stockpiling energy drinks by
This
the
is
case.
painting a
Exactly.
pretty bleak
We're
picture.
looking at a
We
scenario
have
where
postal
senators
trucks
might
driving
actively
past ballots
refuse to
because
drink
of route
water
changes,
just
just
so they don't have
tired
to leave
humans
the floor
throwing
and
out
use
real
the
votes
restroom.
because
Which
they
is
aren't forensic
wild,
experts.
and it's all
And we
because
have
the Senate
robots
is
failing to read
completely
short names
deadlocked
because of
over
a lack
the
of
Save the
geometric
America
data.
Act.
Yeah,
a big
it's a
election
gauntlet.
overhaul
So
bill.
what happens
It's
next?
centered
Like, how
around
does the
measures
state
like voter
actually
ID
attempt to fix
requirements
this?
when a ballot gets
Democrats are
Well, they
aggressively
use a
blocking
process
this
called
legislation,
curing.
and
Curing,
Republicans
okay.
desperately want
Right.
to pass it.
By
But
law,
they lack
in
the 60
California,
votes required
if your
to break the
signature is
stalemate.
missing or
Which means
mismatched, the county
frustrations are
cannot
just
throw your
boiling
ballot
over.
in the incinerator.
Today,
they
you
must
have 28
notify
Republican
you.
senators,
They have to give
people
you a
like
chance
Pete Ricketts
to cure
and
the
Cynthia
defect.
Lummis,
Basically, you have to
demanding
prove you are
that
who
the
you say
Senate
you
force
are,
a
so your vote
grueling
can be
physical
counted.
Right, they
talking
usually mail you a
filibuster.
notice.
They
or
want to
if they
force
happen to have your phone
Democrats
number
to
on file,
stand
they
on the
might call
floor
or
and
email
talk
you.
until
Exactly.
their vocal cords
But
just give out.
looking
And if
at the
that
legislation
fails,
coming
they
down
want
the
to
pipe,
break the standing
there
rules of the
is a
Senate
new bill,
entirely
AB
to force a final
2604.
vote.
And the real
The
shocker
part
dropped
is a very
just a few days
modern
ago.
update
Senator
to this
John
whole curing
Cornyn,
process.
a man who
It would actually
fiercely
allow
defended
voters
the
to
old
cure
Senate
their
rules for
ballots
his
via
entire
text
career.
message.
Just
Which,
published
is an
this
attempt to meet
fiery
voters where they
op-ed.
are.
But how does
saying
that even work
Republicans
securely?
must act now
Do
to
you
get
just
this bill
text back a
passed.
thumbs
Yeah,
up
he said they
emoji
had to
saying,
deal a fatal
"Yeah, that
blow
was
to
me."
the rules.
No, not quite.
Which instantly
The
triggered
proposed
a
system
massive
would
public
send a
call out from
secure,
former Senator
unique
Joe
URL
Manchin.
to the voter's
Manchin
registered
slammed Cornyn
smartphone.
online
Okay.
for,
You would click
well,
the link,
a massive
and it
flip
would
flop.
prompt you
Because
to
the rules
upload
of
a
the Senate
photograph
are
of your state
quite literally
ID,
hanging by a
and then
thread
you'd
right
physically
now. I mean, the
sign
decisions
your
made in the
phone's
next few
touch
days will
screen
dictate
to
how
provide a
American
fresh
laws are written for
signature
the next
sample
century.
right then and there.
Welcome to
I
this
see.
deep
So
dive.
they are really trying
Today,
to drag
we have
the
a
system
custom mission
into
tailored
the
just for
21st
you.
century.
They are trying.
We're going to explore
even
the
with these curing
swashbuckling,
processes,
pirate-filled
we're
origins
still
of the
talking about a
filibuster.
system that
It is
feels
a crazy
incredibly
history.
clunky.
It really is.
And
We'll
when
also
you have a
break
system
down the
with this many
terrifying parliamentary
vulnerabilities,
weapon
this
known
much
as the
subjective
nuclear
guesswork
option. And finally,
just
we will
creates
unpack a
massive
mind-bending
political
mathematical
friction.
concept
People start to doubt
called
the
the
integrity
Manchin
of the
paradox.
process.
Right,
And that
which
friction
proves
is
exactly why
what's fueling
politicians
the
use
most
gridlock
explosive
as a
part of
highly
this deep
calculated
dive.
mathematical
These mechanical
strategy.
flaws aren't just an
So,
inconvenience anymore.
by the end of this
They are
conversation,
actively sparking
you will hold the
massive
secret
legal and
decoder
political
ring
showdowns.
for the
Which brings us
chaos
to
you see on the
Riverside County.
news.
Right.
You will
This is a
understand
perfect
the
example
hidden
of
game
how
theory
high the stakes
that
have gotten on
drives
ground.
these high-stakes
Let's
showdowns.
look at a timeline
Absolutely.
of events here,
Okay, let's unpack
because it's pretty
this.
intense.
Before we can
Riverside
truly
County
grasp
Sheriff Chad
the physical
Bianco,
threats and
who
the
is a
massive
Republican and
stakes
currently running for
of
governor,
this 2026
recently
MTV
seized
America Act
600,000
standoff,
ballots from the
we
2025
really need to look at what the
special election.
filibuster
Which is a
actually
massive
is.
move.
And more importantly,
Yeah, he
how
didn't
it
just
started.
ask for a recount
Right,
or something.
because it wasn't designed this
He
way
used
by the
sealed
founders,
court warrants
right?
to
Like this
physically
wasn't
take
in the
custody of
blueprint.
hundreds
Not at
of
all.
thousands
If you
of
read the
cast
U.S.
ballots.
Constitution,
Right.
you will not find
And
the word
Sheriff Bianco
filibuster
stated
anywhere
he
in the
was
text.
investigating
Wow,
alleged
Nowhere.
discrepancies.
The
An
Constitution
activist
basically
group came
gives the
forward
Senate
and
the
claimed the
authority
number
to
of
set its
ballots
own
cast
internal
in certain
rules.
precincts
So back in
did not match the
1989,
number
during the
tallied
very
by the
first
election
sessions,
machines.
debates
And
ended
the
with just a
reaction to
simple
that
majority
seizure
vote.
was immediate.
Okay, so
On
51
the other
votes,
side,
and you're done.
you have
Exactly.
California's Attorney
But there
General
was this
Rob
massive
Bonta,
loophole.
a Democrat
They
who was
never
running for re-election.
codified a specific
Bonta
procedure to force
immediately
a
sued
vote to happen
stop
if
the
someone
sheriff.
simply
Right, a total
refused to stop
clash.
talking.
Yeah,
Ah.
the state's argument is
So without
that
a
election
mechanism
materials
to
are
cut off
strictly
debate,
governed by the Secretary of
politicians
State,
figured out
and
they
a
could
local
just,
sheriff has no
hold the floor
jurisdiction to
hostage.
seize
They
voting
did.
records.
We actually have
Bonta
diaries from
basically
the very
demanded
first
the
session
sheriff
of the
turn over the
Senate.
warrants,
Pennsylvania
arguing there
Senator
was no
William
actual
McClay
crime
wrote down a
alleged
sheer
that
frustration
justified
that senators from
commandeering all those
Virginia were
ballots.
intentionally
And this creates just a
talking a
away the
massive
clock.
standoff.
Just
You
to
have
make sure a
two
specific
highly
bill
prominent
couldn't pass.
politicians,
Right.
both running
They
for
literally
statewide office,
weaponized the
clashing over the
I mean, if
physical
they were holding the
custody of
legislative
votes
process
themselves.
hostage,
And what's
it makes
crazy
perfect
is that the
sense why the
public is
press eventually
completely in the
started
dark
calling
right
them
now.
pirates.
The warrants
Which
and the
brings us
sheriff
to the
used
actual
are
word
completely sealed by a
filibuster.
judge.
Yeah,
Nobody
it's
can see
easily
them.
one of the
Right.
strangest words
And
in American
currently,
politics.
So
a
where does it
massive
come from?
coalition of media
The etymology
groups,
is fascinating,
including some of the
honestly.
biggest
The term
newspapers
really
in the
took hold
state,
in the 1850s.
they are fighting
It
in
comes
court
from
to
the Dutch
unseal
word
those documents.
freebeuter and the
Their
Spanish
argument is pretty
word
simple.
filibustero.
The public
Which
has a
translates
First
directly
Amendment
to
right to see
freebooter
the
or
exact
pirate, right?
evidence
Yes.
that justifies taking
Specifically,
600,000 ballots
mercenaries
out of
and
the
pirates
normal election
who raided
process.
Caribbean
Right,
islands
but the
and
sheriff
Latin American
maintains
countries
this is just a
during that
standard
era.
law
So they were
enforcement
calling these
investigation into
distinguished
potential
senators
fraud,
pirates.
and that
Pretty
the records
much.
will be
The
unsealed
term
when the
entered the
investigation
political
actually
lexicon because
concludes.
While the
observers
state maintains
recognized
it's
the
a massive
behavior.
overreach that threatens the
Senators
chain
who
of
talked
custody.
for
Exactly.
hours
So the
were
courts are
literally
currently battling it
hijacking the
out,
Senate floor.
and those
Like
ballots
taking
are
the
just
government
sitting in
hostage,
limbo.
just like a
I mean,
pirate taking
step back
over
and
a
look
ship.
at this for a
Exactly.
second. So
If
let's
we are
track how the
applying
Senate
20th
tried to
century
fight off
processes
these
like
legislative
eyeballing
pirates.
signatures and just
Because
hoping
as the
the
country
mail truck
grew,
isn't late to
I mean, you couldn't
21st
just have
century
one
elections.
person shut down the
Are
entire
these
government
massive
for weeks
courtroom
on end.
battles
No, you
actually
couldn't.
fixing
But
the
it took a
system, or
long
are we
time
just
to build a
watching
defense. By the
politicians fight
early
over its
20th
flaws?
century, these
That is the
marathon
core
speeches
issue.
became
And, it goes
catastrophic
far
for a
beyond
modernizing
Riverside County
nation.
or
I can
even
imagine.
California
So
as a
finally,
whole.
in 1917,
When you zoom out to
President
the
Woodrow
federal
Wilson
level,
pushed
these
the Senate to
mechanical
adopt Rule
vulnerabilities
22.
are sparking national fights.
This rule
Because
created
if the
a formal
mechanics are
process
flawed
called
locally,
cloture.
they are
Cloture,
flawed
okay.
everywhere.
Right. Our
which is
sources
simply a
point to
mechanism
major
to force
action
an
at the
end to
highest
debate.
levels of government.
But
For
here's the
instance,
catch.
President Trump
It
recently
required
signed
a
an executive
massive
order
two-thirds
directly
majority
targeting the
vote to
Postal
trigger.
Service's role
Two-thirds,
in
wow.
elections, which is
Yes,
an
he
incredibly
did.
steep hill to climb.
That executive
So
order
stiff
directs the USPS
that over the next
to
4
design
decades,
entirely new
the Senate
envelopes
only
with
managed
special
to
barcodes
successfully
for
invoke
tracking.
cloture
Okay.
5
But it goes
times.
further than that. It
That
also
is
attempts
wild.
to restrict
Yeah.
mail-in ballots.
Southern
so they
senators
are only
famously
sent to
used this
voters who
exact
appear on
tool to
specific
block civil rights
approved
legislation
federal
for
lists.
years.
And I'm guessing the
The
lawsuits
gridlock
over
grew
that
so
started
intense
before the
that
ink
in
was even dry.
1975,
almost
the
instantly.
Senate lowered that threshold
There are
from
dozens of
down to
lawsuits
60
challenging the
out of the
executive branch's
100
authority
total
over
senators.
state-run
Ah,
elections.
okay.
But there
And
is
that
another
60 vote
major case
threshold
happening
is the
right
number
now that is
dominates our
arguably
politics
even
today.
more
Exactly.
consequential,
But
and it's
here's
sitting
where
right
I think
at
a
the
lot of
Supreme
people
Court.
get confused.
The
When we
Republican
hear the
National
word
Committee is
filibuster,
fighting
we
an
don't just think
election
of a
law in
60-vote math
Mississippi.
problem.
Okay, you're
We
gonna have to
picture
connect the dots
Jimmy
for me
Stewart and Mr. Smith goes
How does
to
a
Washington.
lawsuit in
Right, the
Mississippi
classic
have
movie
anything to
scene.
do with our
We picture a
2026
single
ballot
person
box
standing
here
at a
in
podium,
California?
reading the
Because
phone
it
book,
is a direct
sweating,
attack on the
refusing to
grace
sit down.
period.
Oh, the 7-day
But senators
thing we
rarely
talked
do
about.
that
Right,
anymore.
but in
Why
Mississippi,
don't they have
they
to
have a
physically talk
5-day
today?
grace period
That is a
for
crucial
ballots
piece
to
of the
arrive
puzzle.
after
So
election
in the
day.
1970s,
As long as
the
they have
Senate
that
created
crucial
something called the
on-time
two-track
postmark.
system.
The two-track
The
system. How does that
RNC
work?
is suing
Well,
to
before the
strike that
system,
law down
a filibuster
entirely,
stopped all
arguing
Senate
that
business
election day must
completely.
mean election
Nothing
day,
else could happen.
and
The
absolutely
Senate
no
realized
ballots
they had a
arriving
whole country
after
to run,
Tuesday
so
should
they
they change
changed
the
the
procedure,
procedure,
regardless
makes
of when
sense.
they were actually
Under the new
mailed.
system,
Oh, wow.
if a senator
I see
simply
where this is
threatened
going.
to filibuster a bill,
Mississippi is
the
a
Senate
conservative
leadership
state
would just
with a
set that
generous
controversial
grace
bill
period,
aside
making
on a
it the
different track
absolute
and move on
perfect
to
test
other
case to
business.
Oh,
establish a
wow.
federal
So they made
precedent.
it painless.
If the
You
Supreme
didn't have to
Court
stand up
rules
and
in
destroy
favor
your
of the
vocal cords
RNC
anymore.
and
You just sent
strikes
an
down
email
Mississippi's
saying,
5-day
I
grace
object,
period,
and the bill
the
was
legal
frozen.
shockwave hits
Like a
California
silent
immediately.
filibuster.
You
It would
capture
mean
the dynamic
California's 7-day
perfectly.
grace period.
The physical
the
endurance
very rule that
requirement
saves all
basically
those rural
vanished.
voters whose
But
ballots
the physical
get delayed by
records from
consolidated
before
mail
and
routes
outside that
could get
silent
completely
system,
wiped out. Those remain
millions of
pretty
legally
legendary.
cast,
Oh, absolutely.
perfectly
Strom
postmarked
Thurmond
votes
spoke against
could
the
be
Civil Rights Act
invalidated
in
just because the
1957
USPS is a little
for
slow.
24 hours
Exactly.
and 18
Imagine
minutes.
finding
The
out your
local
24
mechanics
hours.
of how a
You
piece
And
of
the
secretly
modern
fund
individual
the
records
government
massive
table
spoken
to a
addiction.
mail hub
It
to
is
get
a
signatures
pretty
stamped.
shocking
In April
realization when you
2025,
actually look at the
Booker
main
spoke
battle
for an
field
astonishing
imagine for a
25
second
hours
that
and
you have
5
a
minutes
savings
worrying
account.
about who was on the
policies
policies
of
of
the
the
Donald
Donald
much
Trump
over.
administration.
The fight is
I mean,
now
just think
Think
your
about the
family
bodily
handing reality.
So let's bring this all together.
This money was
If you're voting in 2026,
lean on your
you're
desk.
not
You can't even
expecting
leave
a
the
governor
chamber
to
for a
fix this
bathroom
roof. Your
break.
vote is
It is a
basically
house
running
is
on a
brutal,
collapse.
It's an
dangerous.
existential
The
crisis
2026
for the
election
House.
will be
Exactly.
decided
It's
by
to save the
postal
House
truck
fund. Really
schedules,
reminds
but
me
then,
of a
your
passenger
car
on a
breaks
speeding
down.
train.
It's going to be decided
It's gonna
by
decide
whether
whether
an
an
algorithmic signal
yank
scanner
an
can
emergency
understand
order
you and everyone
into
else
a
into
short
the
name
walls just because
Take
they
that
don't
money,
like the
pay off
final
your credit
decided by
cards, and
high
plug
stakes
your
It is a
courtroom
highly
showdown.
disruptive
over
maneuver.
exactly how
Wait,
much
that raises a glaring
scenario
question,
when
though.
that
If
physical
this
machinery
rule
breaks
is
down,
so
or at least
The
universal
universal
machinery of
climate
democracy
rebels.
is just
Every
incredibly
car is a
complex.
majority
And right now, every
self-inflicted
single
hates
gear,
one
lever,
point
and sorting
five
machine is under a
billion
microscope.
Why haven't they
Which
just
leads
voted
us
to
with a
destroy
final
the
thought
Completely
from you to
avoidable.
ponder
That is the
long after we
core
wrap up.
Welcome to
tension
the deep
of the
dive.
United States Senate.
Today
right
we're
there.
exploring
The reason
fundamental
the
democratic
filibuster
force
survives is
relies
that
on the
permanently
shipping
destroying
schedule
it
of
requires
post
a
office
maneuver
pickup.
We're
so
looking at the
extreme
strategic
and so
energy of
destructive to the
literal robot judging the
institution
quality
that
of
it
our
earned a
penmanship.
terrifying
It's a
nickname.
huge
long
pot
do
of
we
money.
rethink the
Exactly.
concept of the
The
environment?
nuclear
Paper
option.
ballot.
It sounds like a
Entire
Cold
hidden
War
tax.
threat.
That's a
Let's
huge
walk
Every
through the
single
question.
person
Are we fast
paying an
approaching the day
electric
where
bill
we
to
demand
be
Parliament
fully digital
actually
It really
launch
is. It's
this
become the
weapon?
center of
Let's
a
submit
huge
you on.
political parliamentary
Thanks for
You've
joining
got
us
a
on this
Democratic
deep dive.
governor,